Alright, so now in this tutorial, what we're going to be going through are three things. So we're going to be going through what a record is, what a table is, and some more of the fields that we haven't went through so far. So to start off, I wanted to start off at the smallest level. I know we started off big at the workspace, came down, and now we're at the table. Then we looked at the relationships. Now you should be familiar with the relationships, so you'll understand more about the linked records, and that'll allow you to learn about some of the other fields as well. What is a record? And this is going to be incredibly useful, especially as you dive into, like, for example, one of the apps like the Page Designer app will only ever show one record. And records are really what's essential to making your relational database dynamic. And what I mean by dynamic is like stuff can easily flow in, stuff can easily flow out, and all of the information about, like, for example, J. Abraham is housed in this one record. A record is the same as like a row in Excel. A record is like this right here. Everything I just highlighted by clicking that is a record. And you can drag records using this over here. You can expand a record by clicking this. And you can see everything. You can see all the edits depending on what plan you have. You can see more or less edits to that record. And you can just see a lot of information about the linked records, which is really, again, that power of the relational database. And you can see lookup fields as well. That is a record. So a record is essentially one of a certain class. So like it's like one instance of a class. So a class here is clients. So each client is going to have their own record. For example, with the videos, while you have the clients over here, each record is one video. And that's how the tables are split up. So the tables are split up in classes. So you have like the class, so a class is like videos, or a class is clients, or a class is wishes, or a class is wish lists. And in this wish list class, one instance of a wish list is one record. It's one wish list. So you can see like all of the stuff's connected. That's one record, and that's this right here. For wishes, it's one wish is one of the things that we offer, and we limit their wishes to what we offer, but that's another story. So for clients, this is really the table that we're going to be diving into, because this is the one with the most value for like a service-based business, or just like for your relational database understanding. This is going to give you the most. So for this J. Abraham record right here, you can scroll all the way down here and shorten these up, but you can add a ton more fields. And I've seen tables with like upwards of 80, upwards of 90 different fields just within one table. So for one class, or for like client, they had 90 different descriptions, numbers, single select fields, multi-select fields about that specific client, and especially linked records as well, to make it dynamic and link to a lot of other things and make it super useful for the use case. So that's just the basics about the record. So the record is just one record in here. All of this stuff is connected right here. This record is not connected to this record. And while like these two records right here, they're both linked to J, if I go to the video table, you wouldn't necessarily think they're connected in here. But if I throw a grouping on them, which I'll go through in the next video, you can see that they are connected in a way, but each record is unique based on the primary field. So for a primary field in a database, you have one primary field for each table in your database. And your primary field is going to have less options for like field types than the rest of them, because what makes a primary field unique is exactly that it's unique. So a unique field for us is going to be the client name. And so whenever you're thinking about what do I want to put in this first field right here, you want to find something that's unique to that field. So for us, like the client name here, the video title here, that's always going to be unique. You're never going to have like two of the same clients. Lots of times I really like to use emails, because there's no way that two different people are going to have the same email. And if you do, they're probably from the same company, which you then need to extrapolate into another table that is like a company table and link those up. But that is this first field. So for like wishes, you have like the name of the wish and et cetera, et cetera. So that's really important. There's less field types, which we're going to get into now, for a primary field. So these are really just fields that you can enter that will like allow you to make these fields unique. And if you look over here, if I customize this from a single select to something else, you'll see a lot more down here. So you'll see like a roll up, a count, a lookup, and all these other ones that you wouldn't see on the other one, like a button. So that's the gist of the primary field in the table. That's like the most important field. You're always going to have a primary field if you want your relational database to work well. That's why you always see the primary field coming through on a linked record. Like here I see the video title. Here I see the name of the wish. Here I see the date that the wish list happened. So now for some of the other field types. The other field types, if we just start scrolling down this, so we just talked about a linked record, and that's this first one here. If you click this, it'll give you a list of all the tables in your database, and you can link to any of those. And you can actually create multiple linked records. I don't necessarily always see the purpose to this, but you can create multiple linked records in the same table to the same other table. So like if I wanted to create a wish list 2, I could do that if I wanted to. So that's linked records. So the next ones are pretty simple. They're just text based. So these are text strings. So the first one is a single line text. So that's what we have over here. So if I type in here, if I double click and start typing in here, I can't like hit shift enter and like go down a line, or else it adds a new record. Versus if I come over here and click long text, then I can create that, and that can be like a notes, and you could like include paragraphs in here. So if I double click in there to type, I can type line 1 and then hold shift and hit return and go to line 2, and so on and so forth. So here, while it shows up like that, if you come up here and expand the row height, you can actually see that it is that text, and you can even enable rich text in here if you need. So that's pretty cool. Now some more are attachments. So we talked about earlier, that's essentially just you dragging and dropping something from your desktop or uploading it from somewhere on your computer or whatever that may be. You can actually store files in your Airtable database, which is super helpful. A checkbox, single select and multiple select. These are very useful for categorizing your data for like enabling permissions. So like a lot of times for like a single select, I'll see like statuses. So this is often used in a project management for like the status of a task, or in a CRM for the status of a client. So maybe for our client, we have like pre-consult. We have ready for a proposal. And then we have closed, won, closed, lost. Closed, lost. So maybe those are our different fields in there. And we'll say this is status. And what's different between a single select and multi-select, it might seem obvious, but a single select, you can only pick one in here, versus if I change this to a multi-select, then I can actually pick multiple. So like for some reason, maybe I think they could be in multiple stages, and I could edit that to be the case. So those are some of the easy ones. Another one like is a checkbox. So this is useful like if you're in like a social media content calendar, then you want to have a checkbox and you can be like, is this ready to post? And I'm going to take my caps lock off so it's not on for the rest of the video, but you can like then add just that extra layer of security. That way you can like edit in your filters and stuff to make sure that whatever's actually happening is like someone clicked that checkbox, and you can go back and see who clicked that checkbox. Like if you come over here and expand that record, you can see I checked that checkbox. You can see who like made those decisions. So that's really helpful if you have some of those fields. Now just keep going down these fields. collaborators, that's going to correlate to everybody in your database, everybody shared on your database. There's also going to be these optional notifications. If you want to be notified when you're added as a collaborator on a specific record, you could do that. But this is helpful if you don't have everybody in your Airtable database, or maybe you're actually sharing some Airtable accounts between some of your team members. What I would just encourage you to do instead of using the collaborator, if you're trying to just save a little bit of money, is just create an empty table and have it be like employees. And then be like, this one's John, this one's Jane, this one's Jim. And then when you're in the client list, if you, for whatever reason, wanted to tag someone, like say this is their account manager, if you're saving some money, you can just go to employees and create that field and just not bring any lookup fields in. But then you can like add John, add Jane, and etc. And then you can also, it's useful because you can pull in their email address this way, whereas it's not quite as easy to do with the collaborator field. So that's my hack for the collaborator field. Date is very easy to use. When you're trying to extrapolate date, if you come down here and like you see the formula field, that's a little bit more difficult, and I have lots of formula tutorials on using dates and everything on my YouTube channel if you want to go check out that. Shameless plug. But as far as some of this other stuff like phone number, email, there's a lot of stuff that's very generic to like most form software. So there can be some validation to make sure you're entering some right data in your forms. And it's very, I'll show you later when I give you like a little tutorial on doing views in your Airtable database, how to just automatically create a form with these already in there. But you're going to have to pick them now in the first place. So like, I highly encourage you, like if you know it's always going to be a certain field type, just add it as that field type. If you know you're going to be entering emails for each person, just add a field type named emails. That way it's always formatted correctly. If it's a URL, it'll make sure it's a valid URL. If it's a number, that'll really just help make sure you're getting the right data in. That way you can get the right data out, and so on and so forth. So these are just a lot of like easy ones to just set up and forget about it. And it'll make your database a lot better, and you won't have to do nearly as much data cleansing or data manipulation later down the line if you want to get it out. It'll make it very clean data, is what I'm trying to say. So that is phone number, email, URL, number, currency, percent, duration, rating. So those are all the same. If you don't know what any of those are, I would probably just go Google those. But the next one that I want to talk about is formula. Now, formula is probably the most difficult if you've never done any formulas, but it's very easy to learn and catch on and just sort of get rolling with them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a formula field. And if you've ever used Excel for formulas, you're going to be great at Airtable formulas. They're nearly identical to Excel formulas, except you don't need the equal sign. You can still put the equal sign, but you don't need the equal sign. And so if you're good at those formulas, you're going to have a blast with these. So the easiest one that I'm going to show you guys is how to add different text to each other. So you want to add like this text string and this text string. I'm going to show you how to bring that together in a very simple formula. And I'm basically just going to give you a tutorial of how to write a formula. So when you add the formula field right here, all you want to do is you just want to come in here and add an equal sign or no equal sign. I personally like to do the equal sign. And then if you look right here, there's a list, insert field or function. So you can write like, and I would consider this like hard coding a function by manually not using any of the pre-built functions over here. Like you would see average, column 1, column 2, and all of this stuff, or the if function. You can use like ands and multiplication signs and greater than signs and equal signs and really manually code it yourself. But if you scroll past all of your fields, because you can just click these and bring in your fields, you can scroll down here and see all of these different functions. So now you might need to turn up your video quality a little bit just to see these, because I zoomed out so you can see more of these at the same time. There's just a lot of functions in here. So some of the most basic ones I want to go through, there's a few different types of functions, and I'm going to give you those now. So the first one The first type of function are numeric. So for numeric, you might have, for example, average, sum, min, max, and those kind of ones. So like multiplication or average, you could have sum and a lot of those. You can also have ones that like count how many fields are blank in a specific record, or count all of the fields in a record, or all of these other ones. You can really play around with these. There's a great resource in the Airtable forum for like learning these Airtable functions. I also have a great set of tutorials on my channel to learn all of these Airtable functions. There's like the most complicated ones I go through on there. The next set of functions are, I would consider the text functions. So if we come down here, we can see lower, upper, trim, substitute, search, switch, and then there's some more that are like left and right and mid. And those are going to be really useful if you're trying to get like the first 4 letters out of a text string, or say you're trying to replace text in a specific string. There's a lot of text functions to really manipulate certain fields and get certain data out of them that you want. That's enough about functions. There's also a ton of date ones, but I'm just actually going to show you how I create any function, and this even up to today, just to make sure I'm doing it right. This is the way I go through creating any function, and lots of people don't know how to do them, but this is the most simple I can make it. So all I do is I have a good idea, first off, what all the functions mean. So if you don't, like, you can look it up and get an idea of what the function does. But for example, I know I want to create add different text strings together, and so I want to use the concatenate function. Probably one of the ones that very few people know, but now you're one of the few. So a concatenate function will pull together different text strings. So I just always click on that function, and now you might be like, I have no idea what to do. A hack that I learned is if you just click outside of those parentheses anywhere, like within this function, you're going to get this little explainer over here, and it's going to say concatenate, and then it's going to have a parentheses and then a few operators and then another parentheses at the end. And all you need to know for this is what this means over here on the left, and I'm going to explain that to you right now. So you have your function, and for this one it's concatenate, and then you have a parentheses. So you have a function, and then you have parentheses, everything that you want in that function needs to be between those two parentheses. So that's one of the common tricks with people building functions, is they get lost track of parentheses, because if you do, like, for example, nested ifs and that's a nested if function inside of a different if function. Those can get very tricky the further you get into them. But for us, all you need to know is everything needs to fit between the two parentheses. And if you go to the innermost parentheses and go out one set, go out another set of parentheses, you should always be equal from the most inner set. So like there should be one on the right, one on the left. Go out the next one on the right, one on the left. Solves a lot of issues, especially in Airtable. So now we're good with the parentheses. So you type in your function, you have the parenthesis, and then the next thing is this text1 right here. So text1, that is our first operator. So you can tell it's an operator because it's right after the parentheses and it's before a comma. Now these functions, they're comma separated functions. So these different operators in the function, which I would describe as text1, and then you can see text2, and so on and so forth. Those are all operators, and they're separated by separators, the commas. So that's the key. Whenever you're building a function, just look over here to the left. If it's not in brackets, so like over here you can see text2 and everything else is in brackets, then it's not necessary. If it's not in brackets, then it's a required operator in the function. So for concatenate, we have like text1 right here. That one is required, but text2 is not. So it kind of makes sense. Like I can create one field that only tracks one person. So if I'm only tracking J. Abraham, then that's fine. And that's only going to pull in one string. And that's exactly what it does. So that's all it pulls in. But say we want to pull in something else. So say we also want to pull in their status. So now, if we come back in here, we have our field reference, and that's another one of the beauties is you can field reference. So if you start typing in the name of the field you want to reference, it'll do it. Otherwise, you can just click name. So we have our first operator, which is name. And now we want to put a separator in there to separate that from our second operator, because you can't just start adding them all in one operator. Airtable won't know what to do. You need to follow their lingo over here, like operator, separator, operator, separator, operator, separator. So for concatenate, we have our first name, and then we want to put a comma. So that's our first separator. Now, we also want a space in between the two operators. So we want the name and then a space and then the status. So you might just want to put you might think, oh, I'll just put a space on there. Nope, you can't do that either. What Airtable needs in here is they need to recognize that there's a string. And to tell Airtable that there's a string, what you need is a quote. So a quote, and then whatever your text is. So like if it's a space and then a hyphen and then another space, you can have that. And then you need to end your quote. So those quotes signify to Airtable that that's a string and that's a valid operator. So now you can put another separator, because you have name, which is your first operator, a separator, your second operator, which is a text string that you manually put in there with quotes, another separator, and now this last operator, which will be the client status. So now you can see all of that's in there. You have it's perfect. You can just click save, and that's perfect. So you can see the person, space, hyphen, space, the status. So that's the introduction to formulas. I'll show you another one later down the line if you want. They're all on my YouTube channel. I have like 15 or so tutorials. They're great, highly recommend them. And that's the end of those formulas. But there's also, if I zoom back in here, that way you guys can see, there's also a lot more fields to go through. So some other fields to go through, there's a lot that they're based on the linked record. So one of the great powers of the relational database is this linked record right here. So for this wish list, or for Jay Abraham, he has 2 wish lists. Maybe these are super long, the primary field is super long, so I wouldn't be able to see all of these in here. And I just want to know how many wish lists he has. Here will be a good way to show you the roll-up functionality of your linked records. So I'm in the wish table, and I just want to put prices on these, and I want to know how expensive someone's wish list is. So, and I also want to know how expensive all of their wish lists are. So I'll add prices in here. So if I come down here and use the currency, and I just create that field, this is price. And then if I come in here and select the price to be, we'll say this is an Airtable, an average of $5,000. $5,000. Zapier is $4,000. Slack is also $4,000. And Asana is $3,500. So those are all the prices. Now, if we come over to the wish list, where all of these are compiled under like one person, we can come in here and we can add a roll-up field to roll up how expensive one wish list is. So we're keeping track of this at their wish list level, because for one wish list, it only is going to have that one rolled up value. So if we come down here and we do a roll-up, we can choose, we want to compile the wishes. So we want to compile data in the wishes table. So now if we scroll down here, we can choose the field. So we'll choose the price field. And you don't need to toggle this on or off right now. Later down the line, maybe you might want to play around with some conditions, but for right now, you don't need to do that. So then we just want to know the aggregate. So we want to know the sum. So if you just scroll down here, there's going to be a lot of different choices, and for your specific use case, you might choose one of them. But if we just want to look at this roll-up field to add up all these, we can just click sum, and we'll just leave that name. So this is the roll-up from wishes. So you can see Jay has the most expensive wish list. Now, what you might want to know is maybe someone has multiple wish lists. So we'll change this one. Instead of John, we'll link it. Yeah, instead of Jay, we'll link it to John. So while Jay has an expensive wish list, you can see John has 2 wish lists that add up to be more. And you might be able to see that now, but when you have like 30, 40, 200 different records in here, that's going to be a lot harder to see. So if you can come in here to the client list, then you can just add a roll up in here as well. That will summarize that a lot better. So now if I add a roll up, I can roll up the data from the wish list. So I will roll up that data, the price roll up from wishes, and I will include another sum values. So now I can see that actually John has the most expensive wish lists, like compiled together. And so that's how roll-ups work, is they use the data from the linked record and they roll up that. It's kind of like a sum function or a VLOOKUP with more summary involved. There's some functions involved, obviously. In the bottom there, you can choose between a few that work for you, and I chose some. You can go play around with those as you like, but that's the roll-up field. Another great field to use with these linked records is a lookup field. So a lookup field is, if you come in here, you can scroll down and find it down here, but that's not always the best way to do it. If you come over here to your linked record, you can just add them right here. Or when you create that linked record in the first place, you can add them then, but you don't always have them made. So if you want to add a lookup field, you can add that here. And what a lookup field does is it will add all of the values comma separated. It won't add them up, but it'll concatenate them into a text string. So if I click add lookup values and say I want to add notes from this, you can see that there's actually not many notes because I don't have many notes on my employees, but notes 1, notes 2. So now if I come back to the client list, you can see that it looks up that information from John, pulls in their notes, looks up that information from Jane, and pulls in their notes. So that's the idea between the lookup. Like if I try to edit this right here, I can't come in here and type that because it's looking at it. It's looking it up from the employees table. If I'm in here, I can change it in here, but it's just, that's how the lookups work, is they look up based on this record into that table. And so if I'm in the employees table, say I just add 2 people in here, say I have a lookup in here, and I look up the name in here, you'll see what it does is, as I said before, it'll add those comma separated values. It adds these values in a list and creates a text string rather than adding them up, because you can't add up a text string. And even if I go and add a lookup field on the price roll up from the wishes, which is a roll up from the wish list, I can add that field, and you can see it doesn't summarize those by adding them up, but it has those comma separated values. So that's pretty cool. Those are most of the fields that you'll need to know. Lots of them are very easy to use. Like I said, like the formatting, just making sure you have good validation in there, which makes sure that you have the right kind of data. That's awesome. But then there's also these fields that allow you to access the relational power of Airtable and have a very efficient database on hand. Now, some of these last fields in here before we end this field tutorial, they're very easy to use as well. So for example, a count. This would count the number of linked records. So in my employees table, I had multiple linked records. Like on the many side, you'd be able to, in the relationships, if you watched the relationship video, in that one-to-many relationship thing, you would be able to see when and how many you have in the many side of the one-to-many relationship, or if you have a many-to-many, you'd be able to see the count of the linked records in that case as well. And there's also some great ones in here like created time and last modified time. One of my favorite things about last modified time is if I add that in here, I can change it from any field in here and this is going to be checking per record, but I can change it to specific fields within each record. So if I only want to be checking the changes to the status, I can use that. And I can just create that field. And so that's a great one. You'll never be able to edit this because it's going to just show you it's going to show you the truth. It's going to show you the last modified time. And these last ones as well, if you have collaborators in here, you can track the created by whoever created that record, and you can also check who last modified that record. I won't get into these ones in this tutorial because they're not quite as useful. If you need a button, that often leads to you needing a script, which most people just learning Airtable don't know how to script, but if you do, I encourage you to go check out the button and see if you can use a button to run a script, or maybe you just want it to create a button to open a page designer app, which I have a video on my YouTube about. But as for auto number and barcode, you won't use those nearly as much as some of these other fields, so I'm not going to go into them in this video. So without further ado, I'll see you in the next one.